My last Grimdark Space Marine video was received rather well. We got a decent amount of views, but more importantly, a lot of you tried the style out on their own. Some stuck to the approach directly, some adapted it and changed around a few things to where it better fit what they had in mind, and some even applied it to new chapters already. When I asked for these pictures, I got over 250 responses in just one day. So many I can't even put them all on screen, and I'm sorry if yours is not showing. But it was really great to see that so many of you got inspired to try something new and had fun doing so. It was really motivating to hear some of your stories, so thanks a lot for all the submissions. A little bit earlier, I also asked which chapter you would like to see next, and I was eager to start on the next video in this series, because if I'm honest, it's a lot of fun to paint this way, so in anticipation of the result, I started an ultramarine. I would be able to talk about how blues and red browns create an interesting color contrast, how we don't have to care about chalkiness with this approach. I haven't painted anything blue in a long while, and everyone just loves ultramarines in general, right? Wrong. So most of you wanting to see black Templars or a black version of this gave me a bit of a headache. The reason why this approach is working on colors other than black is that there's a form of contrast in this. Not in the traditional bright edge highlights on dark colorway, but because there's a dark, almost black outline on a relatively bright surface, and that also creates readability. But how do we create dark edges on an already black armor? Maybe I'd have to adapt my approach a bit. Already before I started, I knew that I needed to adapt the base color. Because like I said, it wasn't an option to darken the worn edges to create contrast this time. I had to go brighter. I also wanted more red in the base color. Obviously, that wasn't an option last time, but I thought it would be fitting for the black, so I used mahogany brown. I don't know any direct equivalent for this in Citadel colors, but you can just use any mahogany brown. There's one in almost every paint range. Or you can just mix a color that you like from reds and browns. It doesn't have to be precisely the same color. It won't make that much of a difference. Just find a color you like personally and that isn't too dark. Remember, our main color is black, so we need something that contrasts against it. You can see that I also add some scrag brown so that I get brighter spots and some variety for the underpainting. This color was going to give me bright edges after we applied the black, while keeping the weathered and spotty look. Next, it was time to figure out the best way to apply the black. What I was looking for is a great looking pattern that is easy and quick to do, while also letting the brown shine through enough. I started by brush, and you can see that I switch opacities a bit to see what makes sense. In the end, I didn't quite like the result, so back to the sponge. As always, I start in the center of a panel, press down harder and then go a little easier as I move towards the outside. There's definitely a period in all of this where I need to experiment, because all colors and hues have different properties and are going to behave and interact slightly different with the base color too. But I have to say, finding this new approach to painting and to create my own world within the 40k universe has been a lot of fun and extremely rewarding. And I'll be honest, that was exactly what I needed. Because full-time content creation has been a bit of a roller coaster of ups and downs, and I'm still highly motivated and I'm enjoying it. Sometimes you just feel like everything that can go wrong will go wrong. I'm looking at you, Rhino Arc 2. This piece of garbage arrived straight up broken. It won't even turn on properly. And if it does, the motor does not move at all. What I learned about myself over the years is that whenever things aren't working exactly the way I want them to work, I get this anxious mood that diminishes my quality of life and also makes me unproductive. Luckily, I found something that helps me reset whenever I'm in this mood, and this video's sponsor, Premium Jane, can do exactly the same thing for you. A few drops of CBD now and then, when I feel the anxiety creeping up, helps me to get into a calmer state of mind, and I can focus properly on what is important and on the things that I need to get done. I've been using CBD for that purpose for years now, and that's why I'm happy that Premium Jane, one of the leading CBD product companies in the US, decided to sponsor this video, and they're also offering a massive 25% discount for my viewers. Premium Jane CBD products are third-party laboratory tested, completely vegan, contain only natural ingredients, and are made purely from hemp grown in the United States. Like I said, CBD oil has helped me get my calmness back whenever I was in stressful, anxiety-inducing situations. I've also used CBD gummies after my 3 knee surgeries to get back on track and working out again faster. Definitely go and check Premium Jane's website. They have all the additional information you need to know about their products and CBD in general, and their store has many more products beside the ones I use, available for different applications and purposes. And if you shop through my link in the description, and if you use the coupon code Travarion on checkout, you'll get a 25% discount while also supporting me and this channel in the process. So thanks again Premium Jane for sponsoring this video, and consider giving this a try if my experience sounds relatable to you. Now, back to the video. I knew I'd be doing the shoulders in white, so this was a good place to try and find the best patterns and to get into a good groove for the sponging. Whenever I had troubles reaching with the sponge, or if an area was too small for it, I'm switching to the brush to apply the black. I find this process extremely relaxing and enjoyable. It's really satisfying to see the patterns build up in a credible way, and it's also really fast, which makes you feel like you're making quick progress. I almost feel the pattern looks best on the shoulders, probably because I didn't have to worry about anything there, so maybe the key to the best result is not to worry, and to just apply the patterns quickly and decisively. Because sponging gave me the best looking results, as you just saw, I was using it a lot. However, that means sacrificing some control over where the paint goes sometimes. So I cleaned up some of the edges where they got covered too much, because for my plan to work, I needed them to stay bright. And here and there I also tweaked the patterns a bit, like on the side of the shin guards. Now the main color was in place and I was ready to move to the next step. But painting black is always tricky. You need to leave a certain amount of black paint visible, so it reads as black, but you also need to highlight it. The seemingly obvious choice of gray usually gives really boring results, so I went with Dark Reaper, which is slightly blue, and later I'd be using Wolf Gray for the last highlights. A general tip I have when you are going for highlights: start with a conservative mix, don't go too bright too quick. So here I was mixing just a tiny bit of Dark Reaper into the black and stippled on the first layer of light catching onto the black surface. And remember, you can use the sponge for this. I just went with the brush because I like to control my paint and I don't want to just have speed paints in my cabinet. The way you apply the paints and how fast you do it is all up to you. I'm just showing you my version. Think back to the intro and how many people successfully adapted the first video to their needs and desired results. Take ownership of the way you paint with this. I know you can do it, and it's just so much fun to find your own way of something someone else showed you and in seeing it all come together. I'm highlighting all of the individual features in a way that we call volumetric highlighting, which means you break down all the shapes on your miniature into geometrical objects, which is relatively simple on Space Marine, and you just study how light behaves on these objects and you replicate that on the mini itself. I talk more about this in my Over at Myrmidon skin video if you're interested. So this gives me a guideline of where to place the highlights, and I just keep stippling the paint on, establishing the light situation on the Marine. I'm leaving enough black to still show, so the mini won't look grey, but instead would still read as black. The stippling also gives me the texture I wanted, and it makes everything a little easier when creating transitions, since we don't care about smoothness and our brain does the rest. Eventually I'm going brighter by adding Wolf Gray. The next highlight goes straight in the middle of the last one, and then I expand it outwards. And the good thing is, whenever I have the feeling that I went too bright, I can just add a couple of dots of darker color and even out the transitions. I gave all of these shapes the same treatment, stippling on the volumetric highlights. I tried to emphasize all of the inverted edges as much as I could, because there was no chance to do the traditional contrast building on black with gray on the edges. All of these shapes needed to be a bit brighter. Remember, we need to exaggerate a lot in mini painting, because we want the viewer to believe that this is a real Space Marine and not just a toy soldier. So I'm putting in these confined specular highlights of almost pure wolf gray in places that are believable. It's really important to keep them confined, Making these last highlights too white is the classic situation that leads to chalky results. And of course, too much of the bright colors and our armor won't read as black anymore. For the weapons, I went for the traditional red, and I painted it exactly the same way I did on the Blood Angel's armor from the last video. So you know where to go if you want to catch up on that and see it done more in detail. So here we are. Even though I was a little worried in the beginning, I still think this worked out. Maybe a bit far on the gray side, but I think it just plays into the worn out surface of the armor, and the brown separating the panels better than I expected. However, I feel like it's still missing something, so you know what we need. Metal edge highlights. The reflective nature of the metallic pigments creates a great edge highlight effect, and I think its brightness relativizes the gray highlights and makes them look a little darker and the armor more black again. I also added metal to the chains and the eagle on the chest, and some other details I wanted to resemble metal. I'll come out of the closet and admit today that I really hate metallic golds. Vallejo Metallics only has one gold, and I don't really like the tone. And I don't want to use the alcohol-based golds that exists, and most other acrylic golds I just hate the consistency of. So I cheated a bit, used regular metallics as a base, and mixed a color tone I liked from acrylic inks. Here I was using a mix of burnt sienna and the yellow ink, and I just stained the metallics with the resulting color. And I strategically placed some shadows to define the shapes a bit. Then I gave it one more glaze of a darker mix. I just used a bit more burnt sienna. And that's it. That's my gold done. Infuriatingly simple, I know. I almost felt sad painting over the texture on the shoulder guards. I'm definitely going to make a mental snapshot of this and pull it out of storage when I find something it will be fitting for. So this is another experimental phase, because I had a rough idea of where I wanted to go with the white, but no real plan how to get there. The goal was to have the brown below to show through in a particular way, and I thought it would be best to do it in a similar way to the black. But there's a particular way that stippling bright colors over dark tones results in this gray desaturated mess, and I kept covering more and more area with Screaming Skull to avoid this. Eventually I arrived at a result that had just slightly dark discoloration showing, and I highlighted that with a mix of Screaming Skull and white. But this ended up looking too clean and too bright, and that's not what I wanted. So how can I get from this to where I want it to be, which was a grainy, almost textured look? I started with adding back texture by sponge and brush. But it all really went nowhere until I added chips and cracks by brush on the outer areas of the white, and it finally felt like I had a plan. I kept adding different sizes of chips to the inner areas and then made the outer parts more worn. This is my favorite part of painting. I basically had no idea, but I inched forward to where I wanted to be. You can always repaint areas, experiment and have fun. Eventually I found the right mix of detail. Larger chips went on by sponge, smaller ones with the brush tip, and even smaller ones using a dry brush motion, and ultimately I think this combination is what sells the effect. To add more variation, I also started to make this area a bit darker, so I added black to the mahogany brown. In general, I realized that having darker and brighter chips would sell the effect better. I think it's important to switch up your tools when you do this. While sponges give a good variety of chip size and shape, the brush gives you more control. Here you can see how I increase the density near the black trim with white brush strokes. And here I'm using a relatively dry brush to add the very tiny and dark specks. See how my brush splays and applies multiple dots, which stains all of the surface a bit and draws everything together. Wherever I felt like the density was too much, I sponged on some bright color again, and I'm using the sponge because it leaves more opaque dots and we don't get the graying effect I mentioned earlier. I'm not gonna talk about how I added the decals, you can see that in so many other videos I made already, but I shifted away almost completely from freehanding my own chapter symbols ever since I found this approach, which really lets me integrate the symbols and gives them a painted on look. And when they were done, of course, they looked slightly too clean compared to the rest, so I banged them up with Screamer Skull and Mahogany Brown. I went really hard on that, but you can of course add as much or as little of the effect as you want. A slight color shift with Scrag Brown rounds out the white, and I thought about adding purple here and there, but then I chickened out. I also banged up all of the other decals I added so they would appear more alive and part of the armor. For the tabard, I wanted something very simple but effective. I knew I wanted to play with transparency of color here, so I added a color shift of brown to the lower end of the cloth, simply by glazing on a bit of mahogany onto the black. Using very similar colors for different elements ties them together and makes the final result look more uniform. I don't mind the spotty finish because smoothness and the surfaces looking too equal is not the end goal anyway. Moving on again, I was using colors I already had on the palette, which was Dark Reaper and Screaming Skull. I mixed the beige gray that I could shift from a cool blue gray to a warmer beige color. I worked the mix into the surface, starting more opaque at the top, which is where I wanted the paint to be brighter and more solid and more opaque, and faded the layer as I moved down so the brown could shine through. Next I added more Screaming Skull and worked on the highlights. Again, more solid layers in the areas I wanted much brighter, and then as I moved down I worked with less opaqueness. And I also used the line pattern to create more interest on the cloth. I did this 2 more times, covering less in this area. And I also put a less bright highlight on the inside of the deeper fold. I really like how the cooler shadows interact with the slightly warm highlights, and how the result has this great look of a white robe, but has tons of color variation in it, without using any of the classic "here's how you paint a white robe" approaches. And the great thing is, all of this took about 10 minutes, which just shows how a little knowledge and practice eventually turns everyone into a speed painter, even with just regular acrylics. Among the last details left to do were the belts, and again I just started from the black as a shade color and highlighted the edges with mahogany. Adding lines and texture creates the feeling of a black cracked leather. Grimdark to me is about wearing down of gear, so I'm going wild with this. Of course you can tone down this effect again as much as you want. A few highlight steps followed by adding more scrag brown, and a last one just using pure scrag brown. Overall, the chest eagle felt a bit too bright, so I added a layer of thinned down scrag brown to it and made the outline more pronounced by shading it with a thin line of black. I also used watered down black to shade the metal parts. I thought about doing the eyes in a purple color or the regular red that is used a lot for Black Templars, or even yellow. Damn, now I really wish I made them yellow. But I went for the green I use for most of my marines. I guess I just like them to all share this feature. There's a complete description for how I did this in the Blood Angels video, so I'll not go too much into detail. I just wanted to create a subtle glow effect again. I wanted to do a quick snow base for this, so I started with creating a few different textures on the base by using watered down PVA glue and different grain sizes of basing sand. Once it was dry, I applied a black base coat. I was experimenting with liquid pigments for a while now, and I was looking for a use for the white dust, and obviously snow was the first thing that came to mind. When I only applied the white, it didn't quite have the look I was looking for, but then I combined it with the turquoise oxide as a base, and I was surprised how great it looked. So on top of a layer of the oxide, I put a thin layer of the white pigment and repeated the process where I wanted more coverage. I also covered some recesses on the feet with it to integrate the mini and the base. On top of the white, I put patches of snow texture, and I also put some specks on the feet and lower parts of the armor and the tabard. Obviously, we want our mini to look like it's part of its surroundings and that it's interacting with it. And this is a good way to do this. Ready for the final showcase? Here we go. Again, I'm super happy that I tried this way of painting and that you guys reacted so positively to it. It allows me to paint my favorite 40k miniatures, which is Space Marines, don't judge me. And I'm super eager to try this technique for all of these fancy colors of my favorite chapters. And don't worry, I have tons of video ideas lined up, but let me know in the comments which one you would like to see next, and I'll do the chapter or color that gets the most votes in the next installment of this series. Special thanks to all of my patrons. You're the ones making these videos possible. If you want to join the gang, if you want to support me and get perks like feedback for your miniatures on my Discord server, show up in the credits of my videos, and all of the super instructional Patreon videos and PDFs to take your painting to the next level, follow the link in the description of the video. For now, thanks for watching, and remember, don't be afraid, it's only paint. Where blah, blah. Painting black is always tricky. You need to leave a certain amount of black paint visible. The reflective blah, blah, blah. I'll definitely